welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you're here, either watching live or on the replay, because today we're going to be talking about how to shift our thinking and our priorities on what works and take some time to talk about what really matters. Um, so, if you are new to our show, I am Charmaine Tanner. I host this show that we're currently doing twice a month, and I'm a parent of an adult son, Dylan, with Down syndrome. I was a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher, and after retiring from 30 years of teaching, I became an advocate for families and students. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I love when you type in comments and questions, so this can be an interactive discussion, not a lecture. Not a lecture from me. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Say hi so I can say hi back to you. Hey, Kim. Kim. Snowy Iowa. Burr. I know it's been chilly here, but we've only, I think, had one day of a little bit of snow. So stay warm and cozy. And Abby's here from Kentucky. Hey, Abby. So I am going to show some slides. We're going to pause at different times and have discussions. So keep your comments and questions coming. And Angela, she's going to rub it in. She's from sunny Arizona. I know this is the time of year when Arizona their temperatures look enticing, right? So welcome, welcome, welcome. I am glad that you guys are here. So we are going to get started. So our topic today is a follow-up to what we were talking about last week. Last week, we looked at why asking how questions too soon can actually get us stuck into that thinking that is that current level, that status quo of what is going on. And when we ask how questions too soon, we also like interrupt that ability to kind of think bigger. And we also, so many of the how questions, like how do other people do it? Where, how's it been successful somewhere else? We're really looking at the answer being outside of us, outside of our education system, instead of going, you know what? We have a lot of people right here in our local community that has a lot of answers and has a lot of ideas that we want to tap into. Now, the other thing that we talked about last week was the problem with individual advocacy. And so many times as parents, especially, I think we've been trained to say, yes, I'm advocating for my child, but the difference that's going to happen for all the other kids coming behind them is going to be what makes the big difference. However, we don't really see a line of kids following in that path because the path gets overgrown really quickly. And one of the concerns that we have is there our ability as a community to look at, instead of focusing so much time on individual advocacy, can we indeed look for ways that we can do more collaborative advocacy? And today we're going to be doing just that by looking at not asking how, but what are some other questions that we could ask instead? And I want to make sure that you understand it's not like how questions are horrible. We're never going to ask another how question. It's just that we need to postpone some of these how questions. Like the first one that we're going to talk about is the question, how do you do it? Now, you might think, well, that's a good question to ask, Charmaine, right? However, kind of the unintended consequences of that are we start thinking about, if only I had the right information, if only I had the right strategy, that would be the answer to everything. And again, that helps us get stuck in that current level, like there is this one answer. So instead, I'm going to propose that we ask some different questions. We ask, what refusal am I postponing? Now, you might think, I don't know, Charmaine, that sounds like a pretty weird question. So look at it in this context. So what refusal have I been postponing? Is there something that really is not the type of culture, attitude, beliefs that we want to have our children and our local communities embrace? But have we been refusing? Have we been not really posing those big questions or saying, no, this is not good enough. No, this is not helping other kids. So I think there are some no's that we need to express more. Now, another question that can be really helpful is to say, what do I need to say no to in order to create change? We accept a lot of things that we don't agree with, and we know what we accept is what continues. So, what are some things that you think of in your school, in your school district, that people need to be saying no to more? Now, a third question that you could ask instead of how do you do it is, what do I want to make sure I don't recreate? Because sometimes we know what we don't want. And sometimes we're not real clear on that. So we want to make sure that when we are, gathering our allies and working on larger scale projects, that we want to make sure what we don't want to have happen again. So, hey, Renee from the Chicago area. Renee's an advocate there. Kim says pull out services. So Kim, can you say more? So are you saying we need to say no to to pull out services, or do you see parents in your district where they're kind of refusing to take that decision on head on or have any discussions with? So let me know a little bit more, Kim, as far as pull out services. Or are you saying for sure pull out services are what we don't want to recreate? So thank you. Yes, and I encourage you, the other people watching this live or on the replay, let us know what kind of perks your interest here in this discussion. So another how question that we want to postpone asking is, how do you get those people to change? Now, I don't know about you, but as a parent, I have said many times, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these people that I'm having to work with. How in the world can we get them to change their mind? How can we get them to see things differently? And when we ask questions like, how do we get, how can we get these people to change? What we're really thinking, and we're kind of planting this belief, is that we have a wish to control others. Now, that's kind of a big thing to face, right? Or we think we know what's best for others. So if we are at that level in our school district, and we're trying to make change, we have to really check ourselves, and we have to see, does all of this lie in the other person, or is there something I can do differently? So let's look at, instead of asking, how do you get those people to change, what other questions could we ask that would really get to what matters most? So this first question is like, oh my, what is my contribution to the problem? It's like, boy, when I stop and look at this for myself, one of the things that I see that I continue to work on is for me to be a better listener during IEP meetings, a better listener when I'm hearing a presentation at the school board meeting. So if I was a better listener, how would that help the conversation? Or and this goes with being a better listener, is like, I don't know if you ever get that feeling when, especially like when you're in an IEP meeting and somebody is talking and talking and talking. The school psychologist keeps talking, and you go, oh my gosh, I can't wait till that person stops talking so I can get a word in edgewise. And that's when I know I have to really check myself, because in order for us to work collaboratively with others on things that really matter the most to our kids in our schools, is to really be able to try to look at that other person's perspective. And that's, it's always interesting, because it's like, we want our kids, that's one of those skills, is for them to be flexible thinkers, take on understand other people's perspectives. But as adults, I don't know if I do that as much as I could. So let us know what you're thinking here. I'm going to go over here to some comments. So Kim says, need to say no to pull-out services when the options to stay in the classroom have not been exhausted. Exactly. Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, I mean, it's like, we tried one strategy, it didn't work, therefore your child must need more time in the special ed room. We jump to that conclusion way too often. And so Sarissa says, that's a great topic. What do I need to say no to create change? I know, it's these questions like really get you thinking, right? Renee says, picking up a child after the principal has called you because they can't handle the child. Yeah, those are those informal suspensions. And we could probably have a show about informal suspensions, because that's a big hot topic now, especially at the federal level. Kim says that all supports and services have been trialed in the classroom and not moved to a separate setting until that time. Yeah, and that's part of the problem too, right? Is that when we have separate settings, it's like, build it and they will come. Those separate settings get used, right? Carissa says, not bringing concrete evidence that is usable data to drive services, unforgiveness, and not taking classes to be a better communicator. Yeah, so those are things that I would bet that we all could be working on, right? And it is, I don't know, it's kind of like right in your face when you think of like there's something I'm doing that's contributing to the problem. So yeah, it's kind of one of those soul searching times, right? Renee said, I used to have to pick up her son Shannon up all the time. I requested the suspension paperwork. Good for you. Um, yeah, it's so there are a number of things that we can start looking at differently. So let's look at another question we could be asking ourselves. What courage is required of me right now? And this is something that I think parents are probably, um, you're faced with so many things. And, you hear like, oh, we have to pick our own battles. And I think that's true. And sometimes what happens is we pick things that are easier to change and we leave those harder ones out there, like year after year after year. And it is hard to speak up against a system. It is challenging to be in an IEP meeting with, 12 other faces looking at you. And that's why we want to start doing more collaborative, collective advocacy, because then we get that support from others. And that can be crucial in making really big changes, right? And let me go to one more question we could ask is, who do I want to become? Do I want to be, and I don't want to say like squeaky wheel, because to me that has like this negative connotation instead of you're being a courageous parent speaking up. How do you want to see your relationships? How do you want to see yourself as an influencer? What is it that you really strive for? That you really want to wish that that's what you could be like? Because those are the things that really count. Those are the things that are important, is what we can do to change and what we can do to support others. So yeah, Renee says, don't be afraid to speak up. Be brave, like the song. Yeah, we could have a new playlist of songs that remind us, right? And Shelley's saying, be tenacious. I love that word. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that it's not just pointing our fingers at other people that we disagree with, but it's looking at what we can do also, and how we can build those relationships and start working with others. So I'm going to talk about another how question that we can postpone and ask later. One of the questions we can postpone is, how have other people done it? Now you may think, I don't know, Charmaine, this is pretty important. It's like this really helps us when we can look at some examples of like, how did you accomplish that? Part of the problem though is it gets us into this thinking and this belief that we should only do what has worked somewhere else. And that somewhere else is most likely a community that may not be exactly like the community that you live in, or your school or your school district. That culture might be different somewhere else. And just to say, well, that worked, over here, so we want to replicate it in our district, that doesn't necessarily follow that that's going to be your best way to do it. So let's look at what we could ask instead of, how have other people done it? We could say, what do we want to create together? And first, start from that versus when we look at where inclusion is happening in other places. How did other school districts make that big change in their culture? It's like, no, let's first look at our dreams, our visions, not only for our individual child, but for this culture of school. And that's what we want to first focus on. I know I have a friend, and she often is saying, what would you love to do? And it's not just like, what would you like? How would you like things to be different in your school? It's like, no, spend some time thinking about, what would you love? What would you love to have school look like? And that's the basis that we start with versus, what are other people doing? How can I replicate that? So another question that we could ask instead of how is, what is there that we can discover? I mean, like, this is like, to me, like, so exciting. It's like there are so many other things out there. And the one thing that I like to do is to read books, listen to podcasts that aren't typical education, you know, I don't know, education thoughts, education materials, because we can look at other teachings, other learnings outside of the subject of education, and then apply those to our education. Um, and I'm trying to think of a specific example here, but it's like, um, I don't. Shall we talk about a political example? For some reason, that comes to mind. So we can look at concepts of community organizing. We can look at concepts like, what are the assets that we have with the staff in our school? What are the assets our parents and families bring to our school? What are our assets that our students have? So, we do things like, figure out all the trauma experiences children have had, and we have a whole checklist and a rating scale we can do on that. But do we use some other tool to say, these are the strengths in our staff, these are the strengths of our families, our students. This is what we can build on in our school community. This is what we can use to create change. This is what we want to discover. So I would challenge you to look at, what are some ways that you can use your voice and say, can we spend some time looking at the strengths of our school community? Can we figure that out? Can we look at how we can apply that? So I think that would, like, I want a whole new checklist. I like checklists. I want a whole new checklist on how we can discover the strengths and the capabilities and the gifts that already exist in our school building. And how can we really build on that versus dismissing it and, kind of continuing to look at the negatives or the problems. Another question that might be better than a how question is, what collective wisdom can we use to create what's needed? And I've heard some, and I can't remember the person's name, that talked about, when we share experiences, when we have, this collective wisdom, that what we're doing is we're multiplying the experiences of everyone in that group. Um, and you may have heard me talk last week. I was talking about a new community that I'm excited about that we're going to be starting in January. And it's going to be a community of, this is my dream. It's going to be a community of parents, educators, related service people, administrators, anybody in the school system, right? So families, educators, students, self-advocates. Um, and what I'm hoping is that we build this collective wisdom. For several years, I've had a membership group with parents that are like awesome, awesome movers and shakers. And not only are these parents making a difference for their kids, but they're really getting involved in the school district and the state level too. So I thought, one of the things that I talk about is we have to widen our circle of allies. We have to work with each other. It's it's not just going to be a few parents that make a difference. Um, and so I'm excited if you know yourself that you're interested in this kind of a membership group, let me know. You can, send me a private message or comment here below. It is something that we are going to be kicking off in the new year in January. And some of the things that we'll be doing in this community is learning from each other and sharing and starting to build trust. I think so many times, when I talk to families as an advocate, we're looking at that us versus them mentality. We're asking, how can we get those teachers to change? And instead, what I want to do is I want to look at all the educators that we have across the country that are equally committed to, understanding and appreciating diversity, teachers that are committed to inclusive education and universal design for learning. We want to hear from students. We are the allies of students, but the students need to be the leaders. And yes, when we're young, we help be the microphone, but we got to pass that microphone off to our kids a lot sooner than we have. So I hope that this is something that you might be interested in. Between now and January, I'll be talking a lot more about details, but the big concept is that we work with others. We don't just work alone as parents. And I think that we will learn a lot from teachers. Teachers will learn a lot from the families that are in the group. Everyone will understand so much more when we hear the student perspective. So again, I hope this is something that perks your interest. And Anne says, what's the name of the new group? I know, maybe we should have a contest. I haven't thought of a new name for the group, but yeah, I've written down different things and like nothing like, like one of the things I thought of is like how we can move from being change seekers to change makers. But, that, I don't know, change maker seems like that's like an overused term. But yeah. And Heather, hey, Heather from Florida, she says, highly recommend joining. Yes, yes, yes. And Kim says, so excited. Liz, thanks for being here. She said, this is such a powerful reframing. My mind is spinning with ideas. I know. It's like, it just makes us slow down and think, am I really having the impact that I want to? And something that we talked about last Thursday that I want to reiterate is, we know as families that it takes a lot of time and energy to be advocating for your child. And not everyone has the privileges that we do and can be there advocating individually for their child. So, what my hope is that we look at how we can do more collective advocacy and make a bigger impact. So, it's not up to each parent to fight and get inclusion for their child. And that by creating this systemic change, that is going to allow all kids to benefit from. The other thing I want to mention about our new group is we're not just going to be focused on inclusive education. And I know that's like my roots, from being a special ed teacher and being a parent, advocating for Dylan to always be included. But to me, it's not just inclusive education that needs to change in our system. There are other things that need to change too. So what I'm hoping is that we'll have people from different parts of the country. And it's like, over here in Connecticut, we're working on restraint and seclusion and to get prevention for that, right? And it's like somebody else is like, well, in California, we've really been pushing universal design for learning, and that's what we want to work on. So you don't have to be coming to our new membership community and saying, we're going to work on inclusive ed. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that want to work on inclusive schooling, right? But I welcome groups and, people from your community that there's a passion that they have. The overall, their overall goal is to change the education system. And we can do that through many avenues. And so I'm excited because we'll have people working on different topics, different goals, and we'll all be learning from each other. So it's going to be cool. I know, Ian says, there's so many things that are broken. Where does one start? Yeah. And that's one of those things is to look at those priorities, right? And, maybe rank things like what matters most. If we had this change, how would that benefit not only students, but teachers and families? So yeah, it's like what matters most to your community. Yeah, let's see. And yeah, Kim says time is my issue this year. I want to do more. And I get it because it is a time thing. And we have to be realistic that in order to do some things, we have to take something away. So for an example, in Idaho, I've been working with a very small group of parents, but we are a mighty group to get some state legislation passed against banning seclusion, corporal punishment, preventing restraint. So I want to work on this bigger topic. I want to make a bigger difference for the whole state of Idaho, for all our kids. And so I have to give something up, right? So in my case, what I gave up was I used to do a weekly show here. And I've done that since, 2016. And I thought, Charmaine, you need to put your money where your mouth is. You talk about making bigger changes. What are you doing to make a bigger change? So realistically, I need more time to work on, restraint and seclusion in our state. And in order to do that, I'm going to take two of our shows away. So we're no longer a weekly live show here. We're 2 weeks out of the month we're doing that. And then the other thing, Kim, too, is, I have that vision of like the geese flying and the and they talk about, who's the leader and all the other geese flying behind. And, sometimes that leader has to drop off and go to the back and somebody else is there. And that's why we have to, I think, really look at how we can, gather other people, because the reality is it's hard work and it takes time to keep up on what's going on at school for your child. And then it's like, yikes, how do I do something even bigger than that? And to me, it's having those other people. It's that ebb and flow. Like, yeah, I want to work on this, and sometimes, some weeks, I'm going to be able to give more of my time to it, and then maybe the next week, it's like, I'm sorry, I've got other things going on in my life. But when you're working with a collective group, hopefully somebody is like, that's okay, I got you, I got your back. We're still moving forward here. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning that we can make bigger change. One is to make some priorities of what we do now with our time. And so I don't know. It's always a challenge, right? Renee says, this is my dream. However, school districts must be on board. Yeah, and that's why I wanted our new group to be not just families, not just parents, but to tap into the teachers. And there are so many teachers around the country that really are cheering us on. And sometimes they're doing it quietly because they're afraid of retaliation. And other teachers are being more outspoken. But to connect with the teachers that do want to make change. And it's the old Pete Wright, if you know him, the famous special education attorney for families. Pete Wright talks about, when you're just, one person, you're kind of a fruitcake and, this outlier. And if you gather one more person, you're like a fruitcake with a friend. And it's not until we amass sometimes a larger group of people working for the common goal that we really can have an impact. Because my vision is that we make systemic change. We're not like going after tinkering this and that. It's like, no, it's past time, right? We have had this general ed silo. We have had this special ed silo. It's like, no, 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 no more. So that's my hope and my vision, is that we can really look at what matters. And that's where we put our time. And it's like, is this going to bring us bigger change if I do this with my time? And then to know that you have others that are also going to be supporting you. So what are your thoughts? Let me know. And if you're watching the replay, you can still make comments. You can still make questions, because we'll be coming back to you. So what else? I'm thinking here. I do, let's go back here. And let's see. So we've been talking about why we don't want to ask how questions too soon. We've talked about some other kind of big thought-provoking questions we could ask instead. And here's a challenge. Here is a challenge. And the challenge is to understand that just because something works doesn't mean it matters. We have a lot of things that are kind of working in our education system. But do we pat ourselves on the back? Are we excited about that? When if you really looked a little bit deeper, it would be like, does this really matter? Is this really influencing and changing and creating a difference in our system that really can be sustainable. We know there's been millions of money, in grants for different, groups to look at change, and we still see really dismal statistics of what has happened as far as just the area of inclusive education. So are we really working on what matters most? That's what we want to be looking at. And this is a quote from Peter Block. And if you've been around, I like Peter Block. But what he says is, when we organize ourselves around safety, control, and predictability, we postpone the deeper questions that matter. So, what are some of those deeper questions that matter to you? What do you want to see change? What are the possibilities that you have in your school, in your school district, in your state, that would really make a difference, that would truly matter for kids' lives? Because that's what we need to be doing. Yes, we need to still be doing individual advocacy for our own kiddos. But while we're working on creating this systemic change, that individual advocacy will be necessary. But the hope is, once that system changes, not every single parent needs to be working in this silo by themselves, because the culture will have changed. And that's the ultimate, right? That's, I don't know, for me, that's the vision I want to see. So what else? What else was else? So Heather said, I shared this live to speak up, Manatee. Love this direction that you're already rocking. Always recommend watching your videos to them. Well, thank you, Heather. Yes, Heather's down in Florida. So they have lots of change that they're working on too. So this is something that lights up Anne Marie. She says, I want to see kindergartners start LRE with their general ed peers and not have their diploma track removed at 6 years old. And Anne is active on the state level and the local level in South Carolina. I mean, can you imagine, like, your life goals change, and at age 6 somebody is deciding your future already? And wow, right? So that would be great. And Anne also says, do gen ed teachers need more knowledge about supporting students with IEPs? I was told in college-only class is needed that covers gifted and students with IEPs. How is that enough for a teacher's degree? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. And that could be, a project that you take on. I mentioned last week that in Idaho, one of the things that we tried to do was get dual certification for teachers. So they could be an elementary teacher, but they would also be a certified special ed teacher, which means, right, they would have more courses, or a secondary teacher and a special ed, teacher. And we didn't get very far with that. But that is something that a lot of people are looking at. And Anne Marie, you also bring up another great thing, that is to look at the colleges and universities in your local communities and see how you can also rally some professors and other people at the college level that want to also be a part of changing the education system. So yes. I often think, especially when you have universities or colleges that have education departments, it's like this, all the schools around the college, this is like a perfect time for them to do like action research. And there doesn't, and maybe in your state or, town, it's different, but there doesn't seem to be, and maybe I just don't know about it, very many colleges that are really connected with school districts other than student teachers going to the district, which is good. But it just seems like there's so much that doesn't get translated from the university level down to like, how do we do this in practice? And we can learn so much and really widen our perspective if we have people like, you know, professors that would also be joining, your local group. Hey, Trisha. Trisha's one of the parents I'm working with. I'm so excited because we have lots of momentum going in Idaho, and I'm excited. She said, looking at reaching out to higher ed to see what we can partner on for training away from behaviorism. Yeah. And so the first step is to make sure you can find a college that's not teaching only behaviorism. Um, so yeah, I mean that's a huge thing, right? And the whole teacher prep, as far as not having as many people go into education, having teachers leave after, just a very few years. Um, so, but looking at, what courses really matter for college students to be able to then go into a teaching position. And then it's also like mentoring, right? When you have new teachers, what's that mentoring process? So that might be a passion project that you would like to work on and find a couple other people in your community that would also be interested in that. But yeah, for sure, we have a lot to do there too. So, Abby, thanks for sharing what you want. She said, I want kids, adults with disabilities to be seen and respected for who they are, being valued parts of schools, communities, and workforce. Yes, 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 yes. It's like, um, I don't know if you've seen that Ties Center brief that they have on their website, but it's called the 10 Dimensions of Belonging. I'll put that link in the show notes that comes out next week. And as I'm talking about that, let me show you. If you don't currently get my weekly newsletter, you can go to iep.today/weekly adv tips, because what I'll do is have kind of show notes of what we discussed today and some additional resources like the one from the Ties Center about the 10 dimensions of belonging. I think you would love it if you haven't read it. If you have read it, go back and read it again. Yeah. And to me, it's like, yes, for sure, for our kids with disabilities, we want that. And then I look, what other students are marginalized in our buildings? And it's like, we got to make sure that students that speak English as a second language are seen for the gifts and the contributions that they make. All the other students that are marginalized, this has to be, in my viewpoint, this has to be larger than special education. Because what matters is every child. And so that's my hope with our new group that's coming in January, is that we can look at going beyond special education. And, and I think about, I don't, if you like see the cover of the Facebook cover of the page that you're on right now. And I have there, advocate. And it used to say advocate like your child's education depends on it. And then I thought, no, we need to advocate like every child's education depends on it. And it's not just kids that are disabled, but we have so many other kids in our classrooms that are losing out, and we're losing out because we are not identifying those gifts and building on their strengths too. Tamara, how are you? Tamara says, Anne Marie, my son did have the diploma track and graduates with a diploma, and he's illiterate. She says, how disheartening. Yeah, so see, look at that perspective. It's like, yes, how meaningful is that high school diploma? How do we make sure that kids do have those basic literacy skills before they graduate? So yeah, it's such they're complex things. I mean, I am not saying like, where's my magic wand? I do have a magic wand. I'm not saying magically this is going to poof happen, but you know what? Magically, it's going to start. It's going to start. We're going to start. And we are going to have some big changes that come about. So it's like perfect timing. So what else? Trisha says all teachers should be aware of how to support developmentally disabled and mentally ill students, regardless of special ed silo. Exactly. Yeah, because it truly is one of those things that matters, is that every student is supported, every student is understood, every student is treated with respect. I mean, those are basic things that we should be able to expect from our schools. And when I put I don't know what kind of hat I need for advocacy, but when I put my advocacy hat on, I think about, I don't know, my advocacy thought just went away. So regardless of I had a really good thought. Darn, I'm sure it will come back to me. And Anne says, our general ed students are in the same boat, unfortunately, not being able to read yet receive a diploma. So yeah, that could be your passion project. There are, many groups of not only parents, but educators that have been, helping school, boards and helping school administrators understand the science of reading and what we need to really be doing to improve our kids in their reading abilities. So that could be a passion project that you want to work on. And in our group, we're going to be supporting you. And everybody, different people are going to be working on different kinds of changes. But what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to say, like, these are some strategies that maybe you could look at, and develop some things that are based on your local community. Yeah, Renee says the important thing is to not give up, right? And that's why I think it helps when we have more than just ourselves working, because we need that emotional, that moral support. It can be hard, and it can be really frustrating. And my husband has heard more than one rant from me when Dylan was in school, when I go to IEP meetings as an advocate, and it's like, shit, look at all the stuff that still needs to change. And And so there'll be times when we have that ebb and flow, right? And it's like really hard. And that's when we can cheer each other on and also give ourselves permission to rest, because that's really important. And to, have that time doing things that fulfill us and kind of feed our soul and our spirit. We need that too, right? It's not just like advocacy 24/7, even though it might feel that way. Hey, Trisha, she says in January, I'm going to my school board and asking for restraint, seclusions, corporal punishment to be banned. I will be going every month. And I hope every month one more person goes with you, Trisha. And Trisha and I are going to be doing speaking at the public comment time in December at the Idaho State Board of Education about restraints and seclusion and corporal punishment. And so, there might be some things on a state level that you're interested in changing. And we can help support you with that too. Oh my goodness. So many wonderful possibilities. It's like, yes, 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 yes. So I'm enthusiastically endorsing the idea that we start doing more collaborative advocacy. And we pull in the teachers, the principals, the administrators that also want to see change because they're there, they're out there. And through all of our efforts, we're going to be making enough change so any student that walks or rolls through that school front door, they have the opportunity to be seen as competent, to be seen as having gifts, to being missed when they're not there, to having contributions that they can make and that can be valued. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I hope that you will join us. Like I said, between now and January, I'll be sharing more details about our new membership group. But there are just like so many possibilities. It's like so exciting. And if you are a trailblazer in our Trailblazer group, which we have several trailblazers here, in just about 15 minutes, we are going to be having our after the show. So I hope our trailblazers will join us for that. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for thinking of what really matters. What really matters for our kids? And how can we realize that and make it really come true? So I will be back in December with another live show. Until then, may you have a warm holiday if you celebrate Thanksgiving. And just take a moment to share those gratitudes that you have with others. So until next month, I'm Charmaine Tanner, and I'm passionate about supporting you as we make change together. So take care. We will see you again. And I'm going to have our little song play us out.